Okay. Hello Vermont history students, and welcome to the video for Unit 4, comprising the end of the second week of the semester. And it's been kind of a strange week because of Memorial Day, and I waited to make the movie. Usually they're on a Monday, Wednesday schedule, but yesterday, I made one on Tuesday, and then yesterday I was hoping more people would check in about town meeting and about the discussion question that was up for yesterday, and also there were some other things going on. So we'll make this video today, and it introduces Unit 4, and I'll try to keep this short. Where we're at in the course is that everything that has been written on the site on Blackboard has been wonderful. We just had our first town meeting at the beginning this week. I put down comments about the relative, my reaction to the very smart things that people wrote. There was some relative levels of unity, not a whole lot, but that's what this exercise of town meetings does. Is what they do is they measure unity at various points in time. We'll have another town meeting, comments due by next Monday. The documents and the instructions are already up, and that town meeting is about the 1830s and 40s, which is the subject of the unit for today and I guess tomorrow, which goes from when basically the Champlain Canal was built, the 1820s, through up to the Civil War, the 1850s. And it's comprised of 4 parts. And before we get to that, I wanted to say also town meeting is good. The discussion answers are great. There's another discussion, just one discussion question that is already up for Unit 4, and I'd like to see answers by Friday. And then assessment papers. Someone wrote me and asked if they could turn in their first assessment paper on Monday. It's great. They're very much like sort of moving deadlines, guidelines on when the assessment papers are due. Get them to me when you can. You're responsible for 3 over the course of the semester. You can write 4 and drop your lowest grade if you'd like to. You don't have to write one this week. You have 5 chances to write 3, but please do write one soon. And you want to cover about a 40, 50, 60-year period, something like that. You don't want to cover 100 years because that's simply way too much. You want to have a clear thesis statement. I am beginning my paper in the 1790s and I'm ending it in the 1840s, and over that period Vermont grew more unified or less. Whatever the information tells you is great. I'm not grading you on your answer, I'm grading you on how well you make your argument, and that means use unit notes, use the textbook, and I put up articles, a whole number, like 8-10 articles in the folders for each part of the course, and I don't expect you to use them all. 2 or 3 would be great, but of course multiple sources are the spice of life, and so hopefully you can pick and choose and find an article that's on a topic that interests you. And so then everything, I guess, as far as that goes is good. Look in the assessment papers folder, look at the instructions. Please ask me if you have any questions. I'll try to get through this kind of reasonably quickly, which is that the unit today is comprised of 4 different parts. The first part is on a basic level for you to appreciate that capitalist transformation took place. It's a real thing. Those of you who took the first half of the survey would know. The Erie Canal, what happened on the east coast of America over the course of decades, capitalist transformation, happened in upstate New York and Vermont basically overnight, and it radically reshaped the economy, society, gender roles, race relations, the way people work, the way people lived, the way they built their houses, etc. And so America is a very different society in the north, in Vermont, by 1840 than what it was like in 1815, to say the least. And what you want to do is appreciate the Second Great Awakening and all of the social ferment and the experimentation of the era. And the question to ponder about that first section is, when Vermont experiences dramatic change that originates outside the state, does that tend to drive the community of Vermonters apart or bring it together? And you'll see this dramatic change from outside the state come up again and again. It happens in the 1890s when tourism explodes, summer tourism. It happens in the 1950s and 60s when the interstate highways get built. There's other examples. So, dramatic change from outside the state is really sort of the question about, and just for you to appreciate that Vermont becomes a capitalist, a very different society by the time it is done that sort of transitional period of the 1820s and 30s. The second section is on the mid-hiller dilemma, and again I'm trying to sort of complicate and make more interesting the uphill-downhill dynamic. The first unit was actually on how the founding generation is ambiguous and can be argued either way. The second unit was really sort of get you to understand uphill and downhill as it originated. The third unit was what's the most important things about them, which is to say downhillers don't understand uphillers, uphillers don't see the big picture. This fourth unit, you have to deal with the fact that, of course, it's a spectrum. It's not just two camps. Everyone has a little uphill and downhill in them. And there are people who exist in the middle, who are real mid-hillers. And I gave you two examples. Justin Morrill, a politician who played it beautifully, and uphillers looked at him and thought, he's uphill, and downhillers looked at him and thought, he's downhill. And therefore, he had a long and successful political career. And compare him to Zadok Thompson, a UVM professor who was from Bridgewater, uphill, and went to UVM, like the only poor kid there in the 1830s, and became an adjunct professor, a professor at UVM, but was never really accepted and didn't fit in with the Burlington elite, but then didn't fit in with the Bridgewater people either. And ultimately was never advanced to a full professorship because he refused to take the temperance oath, stop drinking, even though he didn't drink, but he just didn't think it was something he should be forced to do. So he was trapped in between two worlds. And I mean, what is it? Should it be easy to be a mid-hiller is sort of the question there, or should it be hard if the imagined community is strong and vital and working towards reconciling freedom and unity? The third unit is on Catholics, and it's just meant to give you the sense, the appreciation that these categories are going to evolve enormously over time. In this case, of course, in 2015, it's much easier to become a Vermonter or faster in Burlington than in a small town. But back then, there was the first Catholic priest in Vermont, Jeremiah O'Callaghan, found that it was easy to minister to the Catholics in Burlington and Winooski because they had their own communities. But when he went out to the countryside, he found that the Catholics out there, the Irish and French Canadians, had often married local Yankee women or men and had started, because of revivals, had started to go to Baptist or Methodist churches and sort of blended in, anglicized their names. Bouchers became Bushies, Beauchamps became Fairfields, you know, and so they, which he was horrified by the fact that they were assimilating, but they were assimilating in rural Vermont. And so back then it was, because of the nature of interdependence, it was easier to become a Vermonter uphill than downhill, which is just to say that these categories are going to evolve enormously. You'll see it happen in agriculture. Today, in 2015, downhillers farm in uphill ways, organically because it's cool on a small scale, and uphillers farm in old downhill ways on a massive scale efficiently because they have to. So you'll see these categories evolve. And the last section of the unit is on, essentially it's on this coming of the Civil War, but it's on railroads to a great extent. And railroads really accelerate the rate at which people leave Vermont and accelerate the rate at which uphillers and downhillers become increasingly separated. They used to be right in each other's faces, but when railroads bypass towns like Pomfret or whatever, where there used to be a stagecoach road through and thriving villages with craftsmen, what happens is the railroads favor the towns where there's depots, and then the downhillers are trapped in these small towns. Often the professionals would stay, but their kids wouldn't stay. There was nothing there for them. They would move to Michigan or whatever, or they'd move to Burlington or Rutland or Barre or whatever, the big towns. And the small towns became increasingly homogeneous, increasingly uphill as the local economies evolved. And the downhill narrative about this was that the most ambitious and energetic people were leaving. And in fact what was happening was that the people who were superfluous to the evolving local economy were leaving. But nevertheless, this is going to set you up for the narrative that downhillers had about rural Vermont in the Gilded Age after the Civil War, that it was in decline, and there's the great decline of rural Vermont. And so what I want you to get out of that, just really on a basic level, is appreciate the direction that Vermont society is going in after the Civil War. So there's your four sections to this unit, and it gets you up to the Civil War, and it poses a bunch of questions and complicates the uphill-downhill dynamic by introducing mid-hillers and Catholics. And you have town meeting by next Monday. Assessment papers should start rolling in soon, but ask me any questions you have about them. Discussion question by Friday, and we should be good to go. Okay? All right.